The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Marcus looked at his wife with pure disgust. "Look at you," he sneered, adjusting his $5,000 silk tie. "You're just a useless anchor, Thor. I'm about to close the biggest deal of the decade, and you're sitting there in sweatpants, eating cereal. You're fat, you're lazy, and quite frankly, you're embarrassing." He slammed the door, leaving her alone in the silence of their suburban kitchen. Marcus thought he was the king of the world. He had no idea that the deal of the decade was an acquisition by Vanguard Holdings, and he certainly had no idea that the mysterious, faceless CEO of Vanguard was the woman he just called useless. The check for $840 million was sitting on the counter right next to her cereal bowl, and Marcus was about to have the worst day of his life. The morning rain battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, but inside the Sterling household, or rather, the modest four-bedroom house in the suburbs of Seattle that Marcus insisted they live in, the atmosphere was far stormier. Thor Sterling stood by the granite island, clutching a lukewarm mug of coffee. She caught her reflection in the darkened window of the microwave. She looked tired. Her hair, once a vibrant chestnut cascade, was tied up in a messy, fraying bun. She wore an oversized grey t-shirt that hid the curves she had gained after giving birth to their daughter, Lily, 2 years ago. To the outside world, and specifically to her husband, Thor was the picture of a woman who had let herself go. "Are you even listening to me?" Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts like a serrated knife. Thor blinked, turning to face him. Marcus Sterling was undeniably handsome in the conventional sense. Sharp jawline, impeccably styled blonde hair, and a physique honed by hours at an exclusive gym he claimed was necessary for networking. He was standing by the hallway mirror, obsessively adjusting his cufflinks. "I heard you, Marcus," Thor said softly. Her voice was raspy from lack of sleep. She had been up until 4 a.m., reviewing merger contracts with her legal team in Zurich. "You need the grey suit dry-cleaned by tomorrow." "Not just dry-cleaned, Thor. Pristine," Marcus snapped, spinning around to face her. His eyes scanned her body, his lip curling in a familiar expression of disdain. "God, look at you. It's 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Do you plan on doing anything productive today? Or is the plan to just expand into the sofa?" Thor took a sip of coffee to hide the smirk threatening to form on her lips. If only he knew. "I have a lot to do, actually," she said calmly. "Lily has a pediatrician appointment, and I need to handle some household finances." Marcus scoffed, a harsh, barking sound. "Household finances? You mean spending my money? Let's be real, Thor. You haven't contributed a dime to this family in 3 years. I'm the one out there, killing myself, climbing the ladder at Novus Tech. I'm the one putting food on this table." He walked over, grabbing an apple from the bowl and taking a violent bite. "I have a meeting today with the board. Rumor is, Vanguard Holdings is finally sending a representative to discuss the acquisition. If I nail this presentation, I'm looking at a VP position. That's a 7-figure salary, Thor. Do you understand what that means?" "That would be wonderful for you, Marcus," she said, her tone neutral. "For me?" He laughed cruelly. "Yeah, it would be. Maybe then I could afford a nanny who actually looks presentable, instead of relying on whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at her body. "You used to be stunning, you know, when we met. Now, you're just heavy. Useless and heavy." The words landed with a dull thud. Years ago, they might have made her cry. They might have sent her running to the bathroom to sob into a towel. But today? Today was October 14th. Today was the day the embargo lifted. Thor looked him dead in the eye. "Be careful, Marcus. You never know who's watching or who's signing your paychecks. You're delusional, he muttered, checking his Rolex, a watch she had bought him anonymously for his birthday, though he thought it was a corporate gift. I'm leaving. Don't wait up. I'll probably be celebrating with the team. Real winners. He grabbed his leather briefcase and stormed out the front door. The house shook slightly as he slammed it. Thor waited 10 seconds. She listened to the roar of his leased Porsche Macan fading down the driveway. The moment the silence returned, Thor's posture changed. The slump in her shoulders vanished. She walked over to the pantry, pushed aside a box of generic cornflakes, and pressed her thumb against a biometric scanner hidden behind the shelf. A click echoed, and a small panel opened, revealing a secure, encrypted laptop and a burner phone. She picked up the phone and dialed a number, saved simply as J. Status, she said. Her voice was no longer soft and submissive. It was cold, commanding, and sharp as diamond. Julian here, the voice on the other end answered immediately. Julian Vance was her chief operating officer, and the only person in the world, aside from her lawyer, who knew the truth. The board of Novus Tech is assembling at 10 a.m. They believe they are meeting a proxy for the COO of Vanguard. The paperwork for the $840 million acquisition is ready for counter-signature. And the specific clause I requested? Thor asked, walking into the living room and opening the laptop. Clause 14b. It's in there, Julian confirmed, sounding amused. The Ethical Leadership Retention Clause. It gives Vanguard total discretion to terminate any executive staff at Novus Tech immediately upon acquisition, without severance, if they fail a moral character assessment. Good, Thor typed in a complex password, bringing up a live feed of the stock market. Vanguard Holdings was trading up 4%. Her net worth had increased by $12 million, while Marcus was screaming at her about dry cleaning. Are you coming in? Julian asked. Not yet, Thor said, catching her reflection in the laptop screen. Marcus thinks I'm a useless, fat housewife. I think I need to play the part a little longer. I want to see his face when he realizes he's pitching his groundbreaking strategy to the woman he just called an embarrassment. He's bringing a guest, by the way, Julian added, his tone dropping. Thor paused. A guest? Jessica Thorne, his assistant. She's listed on the manifest for the boardroom meeting. Thor, the surveillance team picked up audio from his car. He's not planning to celebrate with the team tonight. He has a reservation at Le Bernardin for 2. And it's not for you. Thor felt a cold spike in her chest. She knew Marcus was arrogant. She knew he was verbally abusive, but she had held on to a sliver of hope that he was, at the very least, loyal. I see, Thor said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Confirm the reservation? Confirmed. 8:00 p.m., under the name Future VP. Thor let out a dark, humorless laugh. Future VP, that's rich. She closed the laptop. The sadness she expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, it was replaced by a burning, focused rage. It was the same energy she had used to build Vanguard Holdings from a garage startup into a global conglomerate in finance and technology. She had hidden her success from Marcus because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her money. She wanted to know if the man she married would stick by her through richer or poorer. She had pretended to lose her job 3 years ago. She had pretended the weight gain was impossible to lose. She had tested him, and he had failed every single test. Julian, Thor said, walking toward the stairs. Prepare the car, not the minivan. Send the Maybach, but park it 3 blocks away. I'm going to make an appearance at Novus Tech today. As Mrs. Sterling, or as the CEO? Neither, Thor said, reaching up and pulling the pins out of her hair. letting the chestnut waves fall around her shoulders. She stripped off the baggy t-shirt, revealing that while she wasn't a size 0, she was powerful, healthy, and imposing. I'm going as the worst nightmare of a man who thinks he's untouchable. I'll see you in an hour. Thor marched upstairs to the back of her closet, past the sweatpants and the mom jeans. She pushed aside the false wall she had installed 2 years ago. Behind it hung a row of suits, Italian wool, bespoke, sharp enough to cut glass. She reached for a navy blue power suit and a pair of red-bottomed heels. Marcus wanted a trophy wife? He was about to find out that he was married to the hunter, not the trophy. Meanwhile, at Novus Tech headquarters, Marcus strode into the lobby of Novus Tech, the glass doors parting for him like the Red Sea. He felt electric. Today was the day. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," the receptionist chirped. "Morning, Brenda. Keep my calls." He dismissed her without looking, heading straight for the elevators. Waiting inside the elevator was Jessica Thorne. She was everything Thor wasn't right now. Blonde, petite, 24 years old, and wearing a skirt that was technically against HR policy, but acceptable if you looked like her. "Hey, Tiger," Jessica purred, checking the camera before leaning in to straighten his tie. "You ready to crush this?" "Baby, I was born ready," Marcus grinned, letting his hand linger on her waist. "Once I close this deal with Vanguard, I'm untouchable. The commission alone is going to be 7 figures. I was thinking, maybe we look at that condo in Miami this weekend?" Jessica's eyes lit up. "And what about her?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Thor? Please." I left her crying in the kitchen. "She's dead weight, Jess. Once the check clears and the promotion is signed, I'm filing the papers. I just need to make sure I secure the assets first. She's too stupid to understand a prenup anyway." "You're so bad," Jessica giggled. "I'm just realistic," Marcus said, checking his reflection in the mirrored elevator walls one last time. "Survival of the fittest. And right now, I'm the apex predator." The elevator dinged at the top floor, Executive Conference Room A. Marcus stepped out, flanked by Jessica. He walked down the corridor toward the heavy oak doors where the board of directors and the mysterious Vanguard representative were waiting. He had prepared his slides. He had rehearsed his speech. He was ready to sell Novus Tech for $840 million and claim all the credit. He pushed the doors open. The room was filled with grey-haired men in suits, the board of directors for Novus. But at the head of the table, the chair reserved for the Vanguard CEO was empty. "Where are they?" Marcus asked, setting his briefcase down. "Running late," the chairman, Mr. Henderson, said nervously. "Apparently there's been a last-minute change. The CEO of Vanguard decided to come personally." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Personally? The ghost CEO? No one has ever seen them in public." "Well, they're coming today," Henderson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "And Marcus, be on your best behavior. This deal is worth nearly $1 billion. If you screw this up, you won't just be fired. You'll be blacklisted from the industry." "Relax, Henderson," Marcus smirked, plugging his laptop into the projector. "I can handle anyone. I can charm a snake out of a basket. Whoever this CEO is, they're going to be eating out of the palm of my hand." At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the room didn't just open. They were thrown wide. The sound of sharp, rhythmic clicking echoed on the marble floor. Click, click, click. Every head in the room turned. Marcus froze. He recognized the silhouette. He recognized the walk, but his brain couldn't compute the context. It was a woman. She was wearing a navy blue bespoke suit that screamed money. Her hair was blown out in fierce waves. Her makeup was flawless. She radiated a level of power that made the air in the room feel thin. She walked straight to the head of the table, threw a leather folder down with a heavy thud, and turned slowly to face the room. Marcus's jaw dropped. His heart hammered against his ribs. The woman took off her sunglasses, revealing piercing green eyes that bored straight into his soul. "Gentlemen," Thor Sterling said, her voice smooth and dangerous, "I apologize for the delay. I had to take out the trash before I left the house." She looked directly at Marcus. "Shall we begin?" The silence in Executive Conference Room A was so absolute that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still hovering over his laptop. His brain was misfiring, struggling to reconcile two completely contradictory images. One was the image of Thor from 2 hours ago, baggy t-shirt, messy bun, smelling of baby formula and old coffee. The other was the woman sitting 10 feet away at the head of the table, fierce, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than his car, and radiating a terrifying calmness. "Thor," Marcus whispered, the name escaping his lips before he could stop it. It sounded weak, pathetic. Mr. Henderson, the chairman of Novus Tech, looked between them, confused. "Mr. Sterling, you know Miss Vance?" "Miss Vance?" Marcus repeated, his eyes darting to Thor. Thor didn't even blink. She clasped her hands on the mahogany table, her manicured fingers interlaced. "Mr. Sterling and I have an acquaintance," she said, her tone cool and devoid of any warmth. "But in this room, Mr. Henderson, I am not Thor. I am the CEO of Vanguard Holdings, and time is money, specifically my money." She gestured toward the screen behind Marcus. "You have 30 minutes to convince me not to dissolve your department and fire everyone in this room. Proceed." Marcus felt a bead of sweat roll down his spine. Vance. It was her maiden name. She had told him she changed it when they got married. Had she lied? Or was this some elaborate, sick joke? She must be an actress, Marcus thought frantically. This is a prank. She hired a lookalike. There is no way my wife, the woman who can't even figure out the thermostat, is running a billion-dollar hedge fund. He tried to regain his composure. He was Marcus Sterling. He was the sales king. He cleared his throat, flashed his winning smile, the one that usually melted receptionists and clients alike, and turned to the board. "Apologies," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly before finding its rhythm. "The resemblance to a relative caught me off guard. But let's talk numbers." He clicked the remote. A graph appeared on the screen, showing a sharp upward trend. "As you can see," Marcus boomed, walking toward the screen, "Novus Tech has increased market share by 15% in the last quarter. My strategy has been aggressive. We've cut the dead weight," he glanced involuntarily at Thor, "and focused on high-yield assets. If Vanguard acquires us, I propose a restructuring of the sales division. We cut the bottom 20% of the staff, automate the client intake, and save $3 million a year in salaries." He looked at Thor, expecting her to be impressed. He knew she was thrifty at home, always clipping coupons. Surely she'd love cost-cutting. Thor leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at him. "You propose firing 40 people to save $3 million?" she asked. "Efficiency is key, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, emphasizing her false name with a hint of sarcasm. "Interesting," Thor said. She opened the leather folder she had thrown on the table. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Because according to my due diligence, your aggressive strategy cost the company 5 major clients last month. You pushed for higher fees, and they walked to our competitors. You didn't increase market share, Mr. Sterling. You inflated the projected earnings by counting deals that haven't closed yet. The room went deadly silent. Mr. Henderson turned pale. "Is that true, Marcus?" Marcus stammered. Those deals are practically done. Verbal agreements." "A verbal agreement isn't worth the paper it's not written on," Thor snapped. "And speaking of dead weight, let's talk about your expense account." Marcus froze. Thor picked up another document. "Last month alone, $4,500 at the Sapphire Club, $2,000 for a client dinner at Nobu on a Friday night, when no client was listed in the log, and a $300 charge for services at a spa in downtown." Jessica Thorne, sitting in the corner taking notes, suddenly stopped typing. Her face flushed pink. "That's networking," Marcus choked out, his collar feeling suddenly too tight. "You have to spend money to make money." "You're spending company money to fuel your own ego," Thor corrected him, her voice rising just enough to command absolute authority. "You call your wife useless because she doesn't bring in a paycheck, yet you treat this company's funds like your personal piggy bank. Tell me, Mr. Sterling, if I buy this company today, why shouldn't the first thing I do be firing you for embezzlement?" The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Embezzlement. Marcus felt his knees go weak. This wasn't just a bad meeting. This was a dissection. She knew everything. "How?" I can explain," Marcus pleaded, his arrogance evaporating. He looked at the other board members for support, but they were all looking down at their papers, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. "You can explain it to the auditors later," Thor said dismissively. She checked her watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Marcus's annual bonus. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, I want to hear from someone who actually knows how to run a P&L sheet. Mr. Henderson, step up your game, or I'm walking." She stood up. Recess. As the board members scrambled to get coffee and whisper among themselves, Marcus stood alone at the front of the room, the projector light beaming onto his chest like a target. He watched his wife, no, this stranger, walk out the door. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The hallway outside the conference room was lined with abstract art and frantic executives. Marcus grabbed Jessica by the arm and pulled her into a small alcove near the fire exit. "Did you know?" he hissed, his eyes wide and manic. "Ow, you're hurting me!" Jessica pulled her arm away, rubbing the spot where he had grabbed her. "Did I know what? That the CEO was a woman? That the CEO is my wife," Marcus shouted in a harsh whisper. Jessica stared at him, then let out a nervous laugh. "What? Marcus, have you lost your mind? You showed me a picture of your wife, the heavy one, the one in the sweatpants. That woman in there she's a goddess. She's wearing a Versace limited edition blazer. There is no way that is the same person." "It's her," Marcus insisted, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. The voice, the eyes, even the way she looks at me like I'm a piece of gum on her shoe. It's Thor. But she's supposed to be broke. She clips coupons for milk, Jess. She drives a 2015 Honda Odyssey. Maybe she has a twin, Jessica suggested, though she looked doubtful. Or maybe you just don't know your wife as well as you think. "I know her," Marcus snapped. "She's lazy. She sits at home all day. She can't possibly be running Vanguard." "Well, whoever she is," Jessica said, her voice turning icy. "She just accused you of embezzlement in front of the entire board. And she mentioned the spa. Marcus, if they audit the receipts and see my name on the guest list for that client meeting, I'm fired too." "Relax," Marcus said, though he was hyperventilating. "I can fix this. I can charm her. If that is Thor, she loves me. She's obsessed with me. She's probably just doing this to get my attention, Because I've been working late. It's a power play, a desperate cry for help. She didn't look desperate, Marcus. She looked like she was about to eat you alive. Watch me, Marcus said, straightening his tie. I'm going to confront her. I'll remind her who wears the pants in this relationship. While Marcus stormed off toward the VIP lounge, where the Vanguard team was holding court, Jessica headed for the ladies' room to reapply her lipstick and calm her nerves. She pushed open the door to the restroom. It was empty, except for one person washing their hands at the marble sink. It was Thor. Jessica froze. Up close, the woman was even more intimidating. She was taller than Jessica, her posture perfect. She was washing her hands with a slow, deliberate calmness. Jessica took a deep breath. She was younger. She was the one Marcus wanted. She decided to mark her territory. She walked to the mirror next to Thor and pulled out her lipstick. Quite a show you put on in there, Jessica said, watching Thor's reflection. Thor didn't look up. She dried her hands on a paper towel. I don't put on shows, Miss Thorne. I do business. You know, Jessica said, applying a coat of bright red. Marcus talks about his wife a lot. He says she's simple, a bit of a burden. He says he feels sorry for her. Thor finally turned. She leaned against the sink, crossing her arms. Her expression wasn't angry, it was amused. Is that what he says? Yeah, Jessica smirked, dropping the lipstick into her purse. He says he needs a woman who matches his ambition. Someone who looks good on his arm. He's planning to leave her, you know. As soon as this big bonus check clears. We're going to Miami. Thor let out a soft laugh. It was a terrifying sound. Miami. How cliché. She took a step toward Jessica. Thor wasn't wearing 6-inch heels, but she towered over the younger woman with sheer presence. Let me give you a piece of advice, Jessica. From one woman to another, Thor said softly. You think you're winning a prize. You think stealing a husband makes you special. But you're not stealing a prize. You're stealing a liability. Excuse me, Jessica bristled. Marcus is a sinking ship, Thor said, her eyes boring into Jessica's. He's drowning in debt you don't know about. He leases that car. The house is in my name. And that bonus check he's promising you, it depends entirely on my signature. Jessica's confidence faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Thor leaned in close, whispering into Jessica's ear. Check his credit score, honey, then check mine. Thor straightened up, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the door. Oh, and Jessica? You might want to update your resume. I have a zero-tolerance policy for employees who help executives fake expense reports. She walked out, leaving Jessica staring into the mirror, the tube of lipstick trembling in her hand. Thor stepped back into the hallway, feeling a rush of adrenaline. She had played the fat, useless housewife for 3 years to see if Marcus loved her or just needed a maid. She had her answer. Now, she was done playing. Thor. She turned. Marcus was marching down the hallway toward her, his face red with exertion. He cornered her near the elevators, blocking her path. Drop the act, Marcus snarled, pointing a finger in her face. I don't know who you think you are, coming into my office, humiliating me. Lower your voice, Thor said calmly. You are addressing the owner of this building. I'm addressing my wife, Marcus shouted. You think I don't know it's you? What is this? Did you win the lottery? Did your dad die and leave you a fortune you didn't tell me about? I built this, Thor said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. While you were out drinking with clients, I was coding. While you were sleeping in on Sundays, I was analyzing markets. while you were calling me fat and lazy. I was building an empire, Marcus. I didn't tell you because I wanted to know if you loved me or if you just wanted a trophy. Marcus stared at her, his mouth agape. The realization was slowly sinking in. The late nights she claimed were insomnia, the constant typing on her laptop. So, you're rich, Marcus said, a slow, greedy smile spreading across his face. The anger vanished, replaced instantly by calculation. Thor, baby? Why didn't you say so? My God, this is amazing. We're rich. We can finally buy that villa in Tuscany. I can quit this stupid job and we can... He reached out to grab her shoulders, to pull her into a hug. Thor took a step back, looking at him with pure disgust. We? She asked. There is no we, Marcus. You made that very clear this morning when you called me an anchor. I was stressed, Marcus pleaded, holding his hands up. Baby, you know I get cranky when my blood sugar is low. I didn't mean it. I love you. You're the mother of my child. I am, Thor nodded. And that is the only reason I'm not destroying you completely. Yet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it up. But the meeting is about to restart. And I have one final slide to show the board. It's about a clause in the acquisition contract called ethical leadership. What does that mean? Marcus asked, fear creeping back into his eyes. It means, Thor smiled, that Vanguard only retains employees with high moral character. And I have a recording from the elevator this morning. Something about me being dead weight and you securing the assets before dumping me. Marcus turned white. You wouldn't? He whispered. I would, Thor said. I'll see you in the boardroom, Mr. Sterling. Don't be late, I hate waiting. She turned and walked away, the click of her heels echoing like a countdown clock. Marcus stood alone in the hallway. He realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach that the useless woman he had bullied for years was holding a nuclear launch code, and she had just pointed it directly at him. The air in Executive Conference Room A was heavy, suffocating. When Marcus re-entered, he felt like a man walking to the gallows, yet his ego refused to let him accept the reality of the situation. He adjusted his tie, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and took his seat. He glanced at Jessica, but she was staring intently at her laptop, refusing to make eye contact. Thor was already seated at the head of the table. She didn't look up as he entered. She was typing something on her phone, her expression unreadable. Welcome back, Thor said, setting the phone down face down. The sharp click of the device hitting the mahogany table echoed like a gunshot. Let's proceed. Mr. Sterling, before the break, you were advocating for a restructuring of the sales division to cut dead weight. I've taken your advice to heart. Marcus puffed out his chest slightly. She's bluffing, he told himself. She needs me. She needs this company. She's not going to torch an $840 million deal just to spite me. I'm glad to hear that, Marcus said, his voice regaining some of its oily confidence. It's the only logical move. Cut the bottom 20%, streamline the management. Actually, Thor interrupted, pressing a button on the remote. The screen behind her changed. The graph of rising profits vanished, replaced by a complex organizational chart of Novus Tech. I had my team run a simulation during the break. We found that the biggest drain on resources isn't the bottom 20% of the sales staff. It's the top. A murmur went through the board members. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, cleaning his glasses. The top, Ms. Vance? Precisely, Thor said, standing up and walking slowly toward the screen. She pointed a laser pointer at the box labeled VP of Sales. The sheer amount of capital wasted on client retention in this department is staggering, private jets for domestic flights, 5-star hotels for conferences that could be emails, and let's not forget the legal fees for settling HR disputes. She turned to look at Marcus. We found 3 settled harassment complaints in the last 2 years. Sealed, of course, but Vanguard has very good lawyers. We unsealed them. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Those were misunderstandings, nuisance lawsuits. We settled to save the company time. You settled to save your reputation, Thor corrected him. But that brings me to the core of the acquisition agreement. Gentlemen, turn your binders to page 42, clause 14b. The sound of rustling paper filled the room. Marcus flipped his binder open frantically. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly tore the page. Clause 14b, Thor read aloud, her voice ringing with authority. The Ethical Leadership Retention Protocol. Vanguard Holdings reserves the right to immediately terminate, without severance or benefits, any executive found to be in violation of the company's moral code, including but not limited to fraud, embezzlement, and conduct unbecoming of a leader that endangers the brand's reputation. This is standard boilerplate, Marcus scoffed, though his voice was thin. Every contract has this. Usually, yes, Thor said, walking back to her chair and leaning over it, her knuckles white as she gripped the leather. But usually, the acquiring company doesn't have evidence of a violation before the ink is even dry. We do. She signaled to Julian, her COO, who was standing quietly in the corner. Julian tapped his tablet. A voice filled the room. It was crisp, clear, and unmistakably Marcus's. I left her crying in the kitchen. She's dead weight, Jess. Once the check clears and the promotion is signed, I'm filing the papers. I just need to make sure I secure the assets first. She's too stupid to understand a prenup anyway. The recording continued. Survival of the fittest. And right now, I'm the apex predator. The silence that followed was deafening. The board members looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disgust. Mr. Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. This is illegal. You recorded a private conversation. That's inadmissible. Actually, Thor said calmly, you were in the company elevator. The placard by the buttons clearly states that audio and video surveillance is in use for security purposes. You consented to being recorded the moment you stepped into the building. She looked him up and down, her gaze withering. You called your wife, me, dead weight. You called me stupid. You planned to steal half of my assets after I supported you for 3 years. Tell me, Marcus, does that sound like ethical leadership to you? This is personal, Marcus shouted, pointing a trembling finger at her. Gentlemen, look at her. She's doing this because she's a scorned woman. She's vindictive. You can't let her tank this deal because of a marital dispute. I am the best asset this company has. You are a liability, Thor said, and the deal is still on the table. But there is a condition. She turned to the board. I will sign the check for $840 million today. I will acquire Novus Tech. The stock price will triple. Everyone in this room will be very, very rich. She paused for effect. Everyone, except him. She pointed at Marcus. The condition of the sale is the immediate activation of Clause 14b. Marcus Sterling is to be terminated for cause, effective immediately. If he stays, Vanguard walks, and I will publicly announce that Novus condones embezzlement and harassment, tanking your stock price to 0 by tomorrow morning. She looked at Mr. Henderson. It's him or the money, Bob. Choose. Mr. Henderson didn't hesitate. He didn't even look at his fellow board members for a vote. The choice between protecting a loudmouth sales VP and securing an $840 million payout was the easiest decision of his life. Marcus, Henderson said, his voice flat. "Pack your things." "You can't do this," Marcus screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. "I built this department. I am Novus Tech. You think this housewife can run things? She doesn't know the first thing about this industry. She's spent the last 3 years changing diapers and watching soap operas." He turned on Thor, his eyes wild with panic and rage. The veneer of the sophisticated businessman was completely gone. He was a cornered animal. "You think you've won?" he spat at her. "You're nothing without me. Who kept the lights on while you were playing start-up in the garage? Me. I gave you a life. You owe me." "I owe you nothing but a divorce lawyer's bill," Thor replied, her voice dangerously calm. "And as for not knowing the industry, who do you think bought your biggest competitor last year? Who do you think engineered the algorithm Novus uses for data mining? That was me, Marcus. I wrote the code while you were asleep. I bought the competitor under a shell company. I have been running circles around you for years, and you were too busy looking in the mirror to notice." Marcus looked around the room, desperate for an ally. His eyes landed on Jessica. "Jess," he pleaded, "tell them. Tell them about the work we've done. Tell them about the Miami accounts. We're a team." Jessica Thorne slowly stood up. She looked at Marcus, then at Thor. She saw the power dynamic clearly. Marcus was a sinking stone. Thor was the ocean. "Mr. Sterling," Jessica said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength, "I have no idea what Miami accounts you're referring to. But if you're talking about the accounts you asked me to falsify last week to hide the losses in the Asia sector, I kept the emails where you ordered me to do it." Marcus gasped. You traitorous little—" "I was afraid for my job," Jessica said, turning to Mr. Henderson with wide, innocent eyes. "He threatened to fire me if I didn't cook the books. I have all the documentation on my laptop." "You liar!" Marcus lunged toward her. "Security!" Thor's voice cracked through the air like a whip. 2 large men in dark suits, who had been waiting just outside the doors, burst into the room. They grabbed Marcus by the arms before he could reach Jessica. "Get your hands off me!" Marcus thrashed, his face purple. "Do you know who I am? I am the VP of Sales." "Not anymore," Thor said. She walked around the table until she was standing right in front of him. She signaled the guards to hold him still. She looked him in the eye. The man who had belittled her that morning, who had called her fat and useless, was now held restrained like a common criminal. "You called me useless," Thor said softly, so only he could hear. "You said I was an embarrassment. But look at us now, Marcus. I'm about to close the biggest deal of the decade. And you're unemployed, you're about to be investigated for fraud, and you're going to lose everything." "Thor, please," Marcus whimpered, the fight suddenly draining out of him as the reality hit. "Please, think about Lily. Think about our family. Don't do this." "I am thinking about Lily," Thor said coldly. "I'm ensuring she doesn't grow up thinking it's normal for a man to treat a woman like trash. I'm setting an example." She reached out and straightened his crooked tie one last time. "Get him out of my building." The guards dragged Marcus toward the door. He kicked and screamed, shouting obscenities, begging, threatening to sue. But no one moved to help him. The board members simply watched, relieved that the cancer was being excised. As the door slammed shut behind him, silence returned to the conference room. Thor took a deep breath. She smoothed her blazer. She walked back to the head of the table and picked up the gold fountain pen sitting next to the contract. "Now," she said, looking at the stunned board members with a professional smile, "I believe we have a merger to finalize. Who has a pen?" Mr. Henderson scrambled to offer his own. Right here, Miss Vance, right here. Thor signed her name, Thor Vance, with a flourish. Gentlemen, she said, closing the folder. Welcome to Vanguard. Things are going to be different around here, starting with the coffee. It's terrible. She turned to Jessica, who was still standing, looking terrified. Ms. Thorne, Thor said. Yes, ma'am, Jessica squeaked. Pack your things, Thor said. Jessica's face fell. But I helped you. I told the truth. You told the truth when it was convenient, Thor said, her eyes hard. You helped him lie for months. You helped him spend my money. Betrayal is a habit, Jessica, and I don't hire people with bad habits. You'll receive 2 weeks' severance for your honesty today. That's more than you deserve. Get out. Jessica burst into tears and ran out of the room. Thor looked out the window at the city skyline. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. She felt lighter than she had in years. The dead weight was gone. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside Novus Tech, the rain soaking through his bespoke Italian suit. He watched as the security guards dusted off their hands, looking at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. He wasn't just fired, he was exiled. You can't do this, he screamed at the glass doors, though he knew Thor couldn't hear him. She was 20 floors up, probably sipping champagne and laughing at him. He patted his pockets. He still had his car keys, the Porsche, his sanctuary. Fine, he muttered, wiping rain from his eyes. I'll go home. I'll lawyer up. She thinks she can steal my house. She thinks she can lock me out of my own accounts. I'll drag her through court until she's broke. He ran to the parking garage, his mind racing with revenge fantasies. He would claim emotional distress. He would claim she defrauded him. He would take half of Vanguard Holdings. He reached the spot reserved for VP of Sales. The Porsche Macan was there, but so was a massive tow truck. A burly man in a reflective vest was hooking chains to the front axle of the SUV. Hey! Hey! Marcus sprinted over, waving his arms. Get away from my car. What the hell are you doing? The driver didn't even look up. Repo order. Bank called it in about 20 minutes ago. Lease has been terminated due to... Let's see here. He checked a clipboard. Insolvency and investigation of fraud. Fraud? Marcus choked. I haven't been convicted of anything. This is a mistake. My wife owns the company. Look, buddy. The driver spat a wad of gum onto the concrete. The order came from the leasing company. The guarantor on the lease pulled their backing. That means you got no credit. Step aside or I call the cops. Marcus watched in horror as the car, the symbol of his status, the machine he loved more than his own child, was hoisted into the air. How am I supposed to get home? Marcus yelled. Uber's cheap, the driver shrugged, climbing into the cab. 2 hours later, Marcus arrived at his suburban home in a yellow taxi that smelled of stale cigarettes. He had to pay with the crumpled cash in his pocket because his credit card had been declined twice during the ride. He stomped up the driveway. He just wanted a shower. He wanted a scotch. He wanted to scream at Thor until she apologized. He jammed his key into the front door lock. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. Nothing. He tried to force it. The lock was solid. What the? He stepped back and looked at the house. The blinds were drawn. It looked dark, empty. Thor! He shouted, pounding on the door. Open this door right now. I know you're in there. She's not, a deep voice said from behind him. Marcus spun around. A man in a sharp black suit was standing on the lawn, holding a thick manila envelope. It wasn't Julian. It was a process server. Who are you? Marcus demanded. Get off my property. It's not your property, Mr. Sterling, the man said calmly. It never was. I paid the mortgage on this house for 3 years, Marcus lied. "My name is on the deed." The man handed him the envelope. "Actually, if you check the deed, the house is owned by the Lily Trust, a holding company managed by Vanguard. You were listed as a permitted occupant. As of 11 a.m. today, that permission has been revoked." Marcus ripped the envelope open. Inside was a restraining order, divorce papers, and a notice of eviction. "This is insane," Marcus whispered, his hands shaking. "I live here. My clothes are in there. My watch collection. Your personal effects have been boxed and placed in the storage unit on Route 9, the man said, pointing to a key taped to the paperwork. "Except for the items purchased with the company credit card. Those have been seized as evidence for the forensic audit." "Evidence?" "For the embezzlement trial," the man clarified. "Ms. Vance is pressing charges, grand larceny, falsifying business records. It's quite a list, Marcus. If I were you, I wouldn't worry about where you're sleeping tonight. I'd worry about finding a lawyer who accepts pro bono cases, because all your joint accounts have been frozen." Marcus looked at the house one last time. It was the only thing he had left. And now, he realized, he had been a squatter in his own life. Thor had owned the roof over his head, the car he drove, and the job he worked, and he had called her useless. The rain started up again, a cold, miserable drizzle. "Where is she?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "Where is my daughter?" "Ms. Vance and her daughter are currently en route to their primary residence," the man said, checking his watch. "Primary residence? This is our primary residence." The man allowed a small, pitying smile to cross his face. "Oh no, Mr. Sterling. This was just the place she kept to see if you could be a decent husband. Miss Vance lives in the penthouse at the Four Seasons. She's gone home." The man turned and walked to his car, leaving Marcus standing on the wet lawn, holding a bag of legal papers with nowhere to go. He pulled out his phone to call Jessica. She was the only one left. "The number you have reached has been disconnected." He lowered the phone. He was alone. The morning sun gleamed off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Seattle. In the lobby of Vanguard Holdings, a massive 4K screen displayed the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline read, "The Titan of Tech, How Thor Vance Turned Betrayal into Billions." On the cover, Thor looked radiant. She was wearing a white power suit, her hair cascading over her shoulders, holding the hand of a 3-year-old girl who looked just like her. She didn't look tired. She didn't look fat. She looked like a queen. Inside the building, Thor walked through the bustling trading floor. Employees stopped to nod respectfully. She wasn't feared like a tyrant. She was respected like a general. "Julian," she said, stopping by her COO's desk. "How are the Q3 numbers for the Novus division?" "Up 40% since the restructuring," Julian smiled. "Since we fired the old management and stopped the client dinners, productivity has skyrocketed. The new sales VP is a woman named Sarah, single mum, works harder than anyone I've ever seen." "Good," Thor nodded. "Give her a raise, and send a bonus to her kids' college fund." "Will do. Oh, and Thor?" Julian hesitated. "We got a letter from him." Thor's expression didn't change. "Marcus? He's asking for a settlement again. He says the legal fees are drowning him. He's offering to sign away his parental rights if you drop the fraud charges." Thor took the letter. She didn't open it. She walked over to the shredder and fed it through. The machine whirred, turning Marcus's desperate plea into confetti. "He doesn't get to bargain," Thor said softly. "He made his bed. Now he has to lie in it. Or in his case, sleep on his brother's couch." "Understood," Julian said. "I'll tell the lawyers to proceed with the trial." Thor looked out the window. She felt a twinge of sadness, not for Marcus, but for the time she had wasted trying to be small so he could feel big. She had learned her lesson. Never shrink yourself for someone who refuses to grow. Meanwhile, 10 blocks away, the lunch rush at Burger Barn was in full swing. The smell of grease was overwhelming. "Order 42, double cheeseburger, no pickles." Marcus Sterling wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He was wearing a paper hat and a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too small. His face was gaunt, his eyes surrounded by dark circles. "I said no pickles!" The customer, a teenager in a varsity jacket, yelled at him. "Can't you read, old man?" "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus mumbled, his voice hoarse. "I'll fix it." He took the tray back, scraping the pickles off with a plastic fork. A year ago, he was ordering bottles of Dom Perignon at Le Bernardin. A year ago, he was telling his wife she was an embarrassment. Now, he was living in a studio apartment above a bowling alley. His friends from the old days had blocked his number the moment the scandal broke. Jessica was gone. Rumor had it she moved to LA to find a new sugar daddy, and no reputable company would hire him with an active embezzlement investigation hanging over his head. He handed the tray back to the teenager. "Hey, look at the TV!" the kid shouted to his friends. Marcus looked up at the screen, mounted in the corner of the restaurant. It was a news segment on CNBC. And today, stock in Vanguard Holdings hit an all-time high following the announcement of their new philanthropic initiative, the anchor said. CIO Thor Vance was quoted saying, "Success is the best revenge, but happiness is the best success." The camera zoomed in on Thor. She was laughing, looking straight into the lens. Marcus stared at the screen. He remembered that laugh. He used to hear it every day. He used to own the heart of the woman who owned the world. "Hey, buddy!" the manager shouted from the back. "Stop daydreaming! The fryer is beeping! Move it!" Marcus flinched. He looked at the screen one last time, then looked down at his greasy hands. "Yes, boss," he whispered. "I'm moving." He turned back to the fryer, the heat blasting him in the face, as the woman he called useless continued to conquer the world without him. Marcus Sterling learned the hard way that you should never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book holds the deed to your house and the keys to your future. He mistook Thor's silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. He thought he was the king of the castle, only to find out he was just the jester. In the end, Thor didn't just take his job, she took his dignity, leaving him with nothing but the memory of the incredible life he threw away with both hands. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve his fate, or was Thor too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs some drama, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes it all. Thanks for watching.